Hello from Westminster. This is Rula in our Thursday's midday meditation. On Tuesday, Pastor West talked about one of the texts that will be used on Sunday and that were chosen by the lectionary. And I would like to talk about the other text, which comes to us from the Gospel of John and chapter 12. I'm reading verses 24 and 25. Jesus said, "Very truly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Those who love their life will lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it for eternal life." Here, Jesus employs a striking metaphor to speak of his imminent death. A metaphor that is drawn from the food chain and about the grain that has to fall into the earth and die. Otherwise, it will remain a single grain, but if it falls and dies, it will bear much fruit. This metaphor or this statement conveys a very intriguing qualification: if it dies. Dying is necessary for the fruit to come out of a grain. We know that in Jesus' days, as in our day, poverty, abuse of the economic system, and even of the land were an enduring part of life. So the dying seed is a very striking image for him to use to talk about his death. And the paradox in there is that the very place of great potential, which is the rich soil, can also be a place of potential exploitation and depletion of the soil. And so when Jesus says that those who love their life will lose it, he's contending that life is more than just survival, and certainly more than exploitation for private gain and benefit. And when he says those who hate their lives, hating one's life, that entails rejecting self-absorption and exploitation. So the eternal life that this passage is calling for, and to which Jesus points to in his saying, is a life of loving service with and for others, rather than a life of benefit, personal benefit, and exploitation of others and of the earth. And he says that resisting the exploitation can be costly, and the price that he paid was the cross. And that's why he was employing this metaphor to talk about his own death. And that's what he did. He lost his life in order to gain it. And he threw his grain in the earth so that it may birth fruit. So I was in the middle of reading a book by Richard Rohr called The Immortal Diamond. And he talks about the true self and the false self. And there is a chapter titled "What Dies and Who Lives?" And it talks about how it is impossible to make contact, to connect with your true self and with your deepest soul unless your false self dies first. And he says that when you die to what he calls the old platform of your mental ego, then you move on from religion as mere belief to religion as a new kind of knowing. Now, what he calls a new kind of knowing, I like to refer to as transformation. So in some ways, he's also using a different metaphor to talk about this grain that needs to die in order for it to birth fruit. The full self that he talks about, and that he calls the mental ego. And there are a lot of false selves, and he says that the religious false self is the most defended of all. It is the self that justifies slavery, war, oppression, and feels no guilt because it has found that cover that it is doing God's work. And then he talks about the validity of a religion only when it transforms one's conscience to one of compassion. And in order for that to happen, the full self must die for the true self to live. And he ends his chapter with the following words. Just remember, we are testing God much more than God is ever directly testing us. Your ordinary dualistic either-or mind, your self-preservative ego, will refuse and avoid this staggering change of perspective by every means possible. So let's state it outlined and clearly. What dies? Your false self, and it is just a matter of when, not if. Who lives? The God self that has always lived, but now includes you. And note that it is a what that dies and the who that lives. I really like that image, and this is the image that I would like to leave us with. What dies and who lives, especially now as we approach the end of Lent and we get closer and closer to the cross. This image of dying, this image of rebirth cannot be any more relevant. And we can think about it in terms of our current days as we're emerging from this pandemic, and where the society and the entire world really is being transformed into something new. And for that to happen, something must die. So what is it that needs to die in your life in order to pave the way for the fruit to come out, for something else to be reborn? That's the question I would like to leave us with. And I will see you again next Thursday. And until then, have a blessed rest of your day and week. Bye.